if you were going to edit, the canon in terms of sexism, and many people would like to, so much of its juiciness would be eliminated. And so to vocalize things like, condescension, lust, contempt, fear, it's all part of the big, sort of ball of turmoil, paradox, conflicting feelings, ideologies, clashing with our finer sensibilities. All of that stuff has to be articulated dialectically in a poem, really lively poem. And I think satirical poetry was one place where that once happened, and maybe it still happens, but maybe less frequently, at least in the American poetry, which I think is really kind of hypersensitive now, really kind of, a little too decent in general. So that seems to me that that's an area in which I might have a particular kind of calling or function to for the greater poetic community. If maybe my humble function is to be the rude person at the party, and so I serve at the pleasure of poetry. The poem is called Lawrence. On 2 occasions in the past 12 months, I have failed when someone at a party spoke of him with scorn to stand up for D.H. Lawrence, a man who burned like an acetylene torch from one end to the other of his life. These individuals, whose relationship to literature is approximately that of a tree shredder to stands of old-growth forest. These people leaned back in their chairs, bellies full of dry white wine and the ova of some foreign fish, and casually dropped his name. The way that pygmies with their little poisoned spears strut around the carcass of a fallen elephant. "Oh, elephant," they say, "you were not so big and brave today." It's a bad day when people speak of their superiors with a contempt they haven't earned. And it's a sorry thing when certain other people don't defend the great dead ones who have opened up the world before them. And though, in the catalogue of my betrayals, this is a fairly minor entry, I resolve, if the occasion should recur, to uncheck my tongue and say, I love the spectacle of maggots condescending to a corpse. Or, you should be so lucky in your brainy, bloodless life as to deserve to lift just one of D.H. Lawrence's urine samples to your arid, psychobiographic, theory-tainted lips. Or maybe I'll just take the shortcut between the spirit and the flesh and punch someone in the face. Because human beings haven't come that far in their effort to subdue the body. And we still walk around like zombies in our dying, burning world, able to do little more than fight and fuck and crow. Something Lawrence wrote about in such a manner as to make us seem magnificent. This next poem is called Benevolence, and it's a poem about father-son relations. I've written a lot of poems about my father. One of the great things about poems is that you can do anything you want to the people in your poems. I've killed my father in numerous poems. He's still living. This is one of the poems in which I imagine his reincarnation in a kind of as a kind of justice, and the poem's called Benevolence, in which the father returns as a Labrador Retriever. Benevolence. When my father dies and comes back as a dog, I already know what his favorite sound will be. The soft, almost inaudible gasp as the rubber lips of the refrigerator door unstick, followed by that Arctic exhalation of cold air. Then the cracking of the ice cube tray above the sink and the quiet ching the cubes make when dropped into a glass. Unable to pronounce the name of his favorite drink or to express his preference for single malt, he will utter one sharp bark and point the wet black arrow of his nose imperatively up at the bottle on the shelf, then seat himself before me, trembling, expectant, water pouring down the long pink dangle of his tongue, as the memory of pleasure from his former life shakes him like a tail. What I'll remember as I tower over him, holding a dripping, whiskey-flavored cube above his open mouth, relishing the power rushing through my veins, the way it once rushed through his. What I'll remember as I stand there is the 100 clever tricks I taught myself to please him, and for how long I mistakenly believed that it was love he held concealed in his closed hand. This is a poem called Romantic Moment, and the situation of the poem is that two people who are dating have gone on a date to see one of those nature documentaries in which a sort of BBC or PBS narrator describes the mating habits of various mammals and other animals in anthropomorphic terms. And so the two people on the date have seen this film, and it's affected their subjectivity. And the poem is called Romantic Moment. After seeing the nature documentary, we walk down Canyon Road onto the plaza of art galleries and high-end clothing stores, where the mock orange is fragrant in the summer night and the smooth adobe walls glow flesh-like in the dark. It is just our second date, and we sit down on a bench, holding hands, not looking at each other. And if I were a bull penguin right now, I would lean over and vomit softly into the mouth of my beloved. And if I were a peacock, I'd flex my gluteal muscles to erect and spread the quills on my Cinemax tail. If she were a female walking stick bug, she might insert her hypodermic proboscis delicately into my neck and inject me with a rich hormonal sedative before attaching her egg sac to my thoracic undercarriage. And if I were a young chimpanzee, I would break off a nearby tree limb and smash all the windows in the plaza jewelry stores. And if she was a Brazilian leopard frog, she would wrap her impressive tongue 3 times around my right thigh and pummel me lightly against the surface of our pond. And I would know her feelings were sincere. Instead, we sit a while in silence until she remarks that in the relative context of tortoises and iguanas, human males seem to be actually rather expressive. And I say that female crocodiles really don't receive enough credit for their gentleness. And she suggests that it is time for us to go to get some ice cream cones and eat them. I tried to write a poem trying to get to the bottom of my feelings about Britney Spears, and in fact sort of trying to say what it is that she is, although she ultimately is a mystery. And so the poem begins with the title, which is the first line. Poor Britney Spears is not the beginning of a sentence you hear often uttered in my household. If she wants to make a career comeback, and her agent pushes her into the MTV Awards show, but she can't lose the weight beforehand, and so looks chubby in a spangled bikini before millions of fanged, spiteful fans and enemies, then gets a little drunk while getting her nerve up, so botches a step in the dance routine, which makes her look, one critic says, like a comatose piglet. Well, it wasn't by accident, was it, that she wandered into that glitterati party of late 20th century striptease celebrity. First, we made her into an object of desire, then into an object of contempt. Now, we want to nominate her as an object of compassion. Are you sure we know what the hell we're doing? Is she a kind of voodoo doll onto whom we vicariously project our fantasies of triumph and humiliation? Is she a life-size piece of chewing gum full of non-FDA approved additives, bioengineered and fed to us by the mad scientists of the mainstream dream machine? Or is she nothing less than a gladiatrix who stalks into the Colosseum full of blinding lights and tigers before a vast stadium of witnesses with naught but her slim javelin of talent and recklessly little protective clothing? Oh, my adorable little monkey, prancing for your candy. With one of my voices I shout, "Jump, jump, you little whore." With another, I turn down the lights and say, "Put on some clothes and go home, sweetheart." And so it's important that poets speak before they think, and that they speak recklessly, and that they make mistakes. Poetry is a realm of speech experiment, and experiment. They have to fail, and they have to take all kinds of chances. And if there's an explosion now and then in the laboratory, that's just a sign of the health of poetry.